Emma loves her father so much. Ever since I first laid my eyes on her, it was so clear just how much love was in her heart, ready to cloak everyone around her in a veil of pure admiration. I can't wait for it to cloak me as well. Emma loves her father so much. I remember the first time I cradled her in my arms, so small and vulnerable. I knew our bond would be unbreakable, and all I wanted was to shelter and protect her forever. Emma loves her father so much. She loves it when we go to the park and I push her on the swing, and it just warms my heart when I hear her giggle, "Higher, Daddy, higher." Emma loves her father so much. She loves it when I take her to the museum to see the dinosaurs, and the sparkle in her eyes when she looks up at the grand skeletons makes me happier than I ever imagined. Emma loves her father so much. Her sister is not so keen, however. She always seemed older, more mature for her age. Her lips permanently form a thin line, and she never looks me in the eye. I know it upsets Emma, but there's nothing I can do. She just never warmed to me. That hurts for a father to know. Emma loves her father so much. She loves it when I tuck her in at night, reading her a story and telling her that nothing bad could ever happen to her. Little does she know, the worst has already happened. You see, Emma loves her father so much. I bet she never knew I was wearing his skin.
Dr. Dolittle has always cracked me up. The notion that speaking with animals is as simple as the movie depicts is downright hysterical. I've always had the gift to communicate with animals, which of course led to the natural career for anyone in my position, a veterinarian. In school, my peers were jealous and my professors in awe of my immaculate ability to quickly diagnose and treat the most exhaustive of diseases. I was offered the most prestigious positions across the nation, even once begged by a producer to have my own television show saving wild animals. However, I have a guilty pleasure that provides more satisfaction than any job could. This is what led me to his door. You want to get into the business then, eh? I nodded my head as he chuckled. You see all this? He waved his hand to the expansive countryside that his farm rested upon. Cockfighting gave me this, and it's more lucrative now than ever, if I may say. I have the best stock this side of the country. Oh, so I've heard. They also tell you my cheapest cock is $5,000, right? He became serious very quickly. I met his gaze. Yes. Well, good. Let's go to the barn and I'll show you my stock. My heart quickened as we entered. Oh, I bet these right here can deal a lot of damage, right? Oh, these? Well, yeah, they're straight from Guatemala. Mean-ass fuckers, I tell ya. Look at them spurs! He whistled as he shook his head. Then they're also $10,000. I see. I continued to browse through the endless selections of roosters prepared to fight to the death at any moment. I turned to see him reach for his phone. Now, you don't mind if I step away to take this, do ya? Oh, please, not at all. I began listening to them, asking them questions to grasp which were the toughest in the group, the ones that were willing to give it all for the final win. I opened the cage to the one I understood to be a leader, to be the one that would...
Hey now, what are you doing?
I looked into the eyes of the rooster. He confirmed with a slight croak in his throat. In a moment, a blur of feathers was on the biggest supplier of illegal fighting roosters in the southeastern part of the US. He screamed at me as I witnessed the flogging.
Now don't just stand there, help me!
Instead, I unlocked another cage. Then another. And another. And I kept this up until they were all empty. His screams being masked by the squall of fowl who were sick of their gladiator-style slavery was like classical music to my ears. I enjoyed the colors of the feathers sprinkled with blood as they pecked and spurred their way to freedom. I told you at the beginning that I have a guilty pleasure. My next stop is Kentucky. I hear that there's a bit of a business in dog fighting over there.
The first account, it was in a warm September, a month still haunted by the saddening winter. If well I remember, the winds still lashed, the village where, upon dusk, dogs barked, the place where, until dawn, no soul wandered. That dame, I first saw her in a mere instant, when I uttered abruptly my fearful shout of horror, blew the irises of the visage whose lips in scarlet bled my own bare neck in a silent hot ardour. The nights, gelid, were born with that silhouette, only the naive moonlight touched the parapet, when under the Victorian garb came that brunette. It was a beautiful cadaver of a hair so flourished, of a woman whose beautiful face, though dead, whose vibrant death almost plainly alive, on my pulsing blood relentlessly fed. The last night it was a pure October of warmth. Cloudy was my gaze, bohemian of those cold lips, that anemic turned my heart that burned of love. And so the last kiss my lips profoundly touched, and she did not bring death. Distinct was my fate. The death, so vivid, came as a cursed blessing, which I have, my dear God, accepted so straight. Ever since then, damned and accursed, I observe the fine thread of the sin which is life post-death, even if from the shallow graves, quiet and inert, we search as both after each passing sunset, and even if then death equally us embrace, if our diseased life only lives after twilight, each October to the village we return for more. Life more than enough to keep the flesh alive, and death always dead, but that dies no more.
Skinwalker in the Woods by Dark Raven. I live next to a Navajo reservation and have made friends with many of the people there my age. We like to hang out, play video games, and just be normal teens. I walk over a lot since my best friend lives a little less than a mile away from me. This isn't a long trek and usually only takes me about 25 to 30 minutes. I've made this trip dozens of times and have grown very comfortable with it. I know the people along the way, so I'm not scared or on edge. There is a patch of forest, however, about midway there. It's a little unnerving sometimes. There was always that feeling of being watched. This was a regular occurrence for me, so I tried to just ignore it and shake it off, as my mind playing tricks on me. This day, I spent more time at my friend's house than I meant to, and when I left it was already getting dark. I reached the stretch of forest right as the sun disappeared from the sky. I shivered a little as I readied myself to begin the journey through. I was 10 steps in when I heard a branch snap. You know the sound. The one that screams there's definitely someone or something there with you. I froze, not sure of what I should do next. Should I run? Should I turn around and book it back to my friend's house? I didn't know the best option in this situation. I whispered, "Hello?" hearing my voice crack as the words fell from my lips. I don't know why I even opened my mouth, but it was out there, so I listened for any reply. My heart sank when the answer came back in the sound of my voice. "Hello?" I started to breathe too fast. My heart pounded against my chest. I felt like I might faint. "Hello? Hello? Hello?" My voice came again, but not from my mouth. I wanted to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. I couldn't scream. I couldn't reply. As my voice echoed over and over from a short distance away, I couldn't pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It sounded like it was everywhere around me. "Hello? Hello? Hello? Hello?" It repeated. "Stop it!" I finally managed to tear from my lips. Everything went silent. For a long minute, nothing happened. The air grew still, and I realized for the first time that there was no typical forest sounds. There were no bugs, no frogs or crickets, nothing. I stood there terrified, waiting to see what would happen next. "Stop it! Stop it!" it mimicked back. I'd had enough, and I was willing my heavy legs to move. Before I could take a step, I heard rustling in the bushes 20 feet to my left. I watched in horror as a deer head with huge antlers protruding through the brush. As it came further out and stood up on twos, I took off. I flew out of those woods and all the way home in record time. I said nothing to my mom when I got there. I just went up to my room, laid down, and thought about what happened. My mother came in at some point and asked me if everything was all right. I replied that yes, I was just tired. I don't know why I didn't tell her. I guess I might have been afraid of how she would react. I called my friend and told him everything. He freaked out and told me that no matter what happened that night, to not reply or look out my window. This terrified me even more. He said to call him the next morning and he would explain more, and that he had to speak to his grandfather as soon as possible. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed awake listening to every little sound of the night. Around 3 a.m., just as I was about to drift off, the air changed. The night sounds quieted. I felt my heart beginning to pound. I lay there and waited, pulling the covers up over my head like a child, far too scared to move. It came after a long moment. "Hello?" I cried. It was all I could do. "Hello? Stop it! Hello? Stop it!" It mocked what I had said in the woods again. It was terrifying enough when it copied what I said, but then it did something new. It called my name. "Amy!" My mother's voice. "Amy! Amy, come here! Hello? Stop it!" My voice again. For the rest of the night, the creature outside my window called my name in my mother's voice and repeated what I said in the woods over and over. In the morning, when the sun broke through the dark, it finally stopped. I fell into a fitful sleep. I woke around 12 to my friend calling to tell me he had spoken to his grandfather and could explain what happened to me. He said there was a creature called the Myuuji. He was going on all fours, or a Skinwalker. He explained that it was an evil witch that used dark magic to transform into an animal with the attributes it required, and that it had caught my scent and knew me now. I was also given a warning that since it knew me, it would always follow me, that I would always have to be careful. Last night I heard scratching on my window, then a low hum. The creature began saying my name again, but also adding in things I hadn't said, in my mother's voice. At one point, it started to call my name, but drawing it out really far, like, Amy. It tried to get me to come outside or to open the door and let it in my house. This went on all night. At this point, I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what to do. Is it seriously going to stalk the shadows around me for the rest of my life? I don't think I can take that.
This story is about my aunt. She was the loveliest woman that you could ever meet, and was a big influence in my life when I was growing up. I don't know how all of this started, but out of nowhere one day she just went crazy. Let me give you a bit of background. I am a 6'2", rather fit man. I practice Aikido and can bench press 240. My father and his brothers are pretty much as tall as I am, maybe less strong due to age though, and most of them have been practicing fighting sports for a long time. My aunt, by contrast, is about 5'2", and probably weighs about 110 pounds at best. She would get incredibly angry and out of control at random times, spitting nonsense words, and there would be absolutely no way my father or I, or even together, would be able to get her down. It felt like Dragon Ball Z Yamcha trying to get Perfect Cell into a UFC submission. She had about 10 times my strength. We needed to be 4 to actually pin her down and get her to stop moving until she calmed down. This was extremely scary, as she would just switch without warning, which was so out of character for her. I didn't believe in the supernatural, but my grandmother, a traditional Moroccan woman, was convinced that she was possessed. And honestly, it really felt like it. For those of you who don't know, Morocco has a pretty big culture surrounding the supernatural, sorcery, possessions and exorcisms, so most of the elders in the family firmly believe in it. However, at the time, the rest of my family were not buying it. We took her to the hospital and had some extensive tests done on her, because we thought that she must be suffering from some kind of seizures. But everything came back negative. Someone even recommended a psychiatrist, and although we took her there, it was of no help whatsoever. We were all becoming very concerned. So fast forward a few months later, and it was becoming way too difficult for us to handle. My uncle contacted a good friend in Morocco, who was an exorcist in his family. He asked us to do one very strange thing. He asked my aunt if she could put a drop of blood into a glass of water and leave the glass somewhere in the apartment while she slept, but just nowhere near her, so that she didn't get up and drink it while she was sleeping. We were reluctant, but my grandmother insisted on her doing it. On the morning, the glass was empty. I personally am still convinced she just woke up and drank it, but in the Exorcist version, she was possessed by a demon, commonly known in our culture as a jinn. Giving him blood was just a way for you to welcome him and calm him down temporarily, and she needed to see an exorcist ASAP. Now we were getting convinced that he was right, seeing her often becoming crazier and crazier. In desperate times, sometimes you just choose to believe in a possible solution. So at this point I decided to believe in what he said, and we had to get proof that he was right. We lived in France, and we decided to drive down to Morocco, which was a 1,500 kilometer drive with a 6-hour boat ride, and then another 500 kilometers driving when we got to Morocco. During the drive, I have never been as scared as I am to this day. I was sitting in the back, my auntie in the middle and my dad on the other side. She went crazy at some point. We couldn't hold her down and she was trying to hit my uncle whilst he was driving. We nearly smashed into a wall, and my father had to dangerously choke her until she lost some strength. I know it sounds horrible, but she really was beyond it. So anyway, here we are in Morocco, getting to this village named Seferu, known as one of the biggest places in the country where sorcery happens. It's a rather creepy place, and not in a conventional creepy way either. What we all know of creeps are just what horror movies puts into picture, but the African creepy is on another level. We get to meet this exorcist guy, and he asks us to buy a sheep to sacrifice, and tells us that we should bring him the sheep's guts back for the exorcism to happen. My father and uncle take care of this, as I am absolutely petrified. As I stated earlier, I didn't believe in this. I decided to because honestly the situation called for it. But at this point, in a freaky spooky village in the middle of Morocco, we were advised to never eat anything outside or accept anything from a stranger who might try and curse us, where everything looked twisted as hell. I was losing it, and really could not wait to leave this place forever. On the following day, we went to the exorcist's house and brought him these guts. He put them into a bowl and asked me if we were feeling strong enough to stay, as more people around would make it easier to exorcise. Well, I really wanted to leave, but seeing as everyone was staying, I stayed as well. My aunt was lying down in front of us next to the bowl, and we were sitting down around her holding hands, and the exorcist started saying stuff in a dialect that I couldn't understand. He gets sweaty and begins speaking faster, and I see my aunt twitching in what looks like pain. And then all of a sudden, all the lights went out. Holy shit, I think I peed my pants at this moment. The exorcist screamed something, and then my aunt screamed as well, and we were in total silence in the dark. I think the silence lasted for about 30 seconds, but honestly it felt like hours. The exorcist's assistant then came in with a lamp, and what we see is that both him and my aunt are passed out. The bowl is on the floor, and the guts are next to it. The guts had turned black. I'm not joking, they were red before the lights went out, and then they were black, as if they'd been singed beyond belief. I have goosebumps just remembering that and trying to picture it. The assistant urges us not to touch the guts at any cost. The exorcist wakes up and goes to put some water on his face, and then tells us to follow him. We went to a nearby empty hill, and when we reached the top, he asked us to burn the guts right then and there, as the demon was now possessing the sheep, and we could get rid of it. And that's exactly what we did. Since that day, my aunt has never shown any problems whatsoever. Her crisis period never happened again. Trying to remember this honestly scares the crap out of me. Just seeing her now gives me the chills, even though she is back to being the loveliest person I know. I am just so glad though, that she is back to the way she was.
I am a human lie detector. I am neither a trained behavior analyst, nor have I done extensive research in kinesics. Rather, even the tiniest fib will trigger an electrical wave in my brain that lights up my visual cortex like the 4th of July. As a result, I experience something akin to one of those glowing visual auras associated with a migraine, only in a short-lived, highly concentrated burst. Think glitter bomb, but without the mess. I have been this way for as long as I can remember, but I didn't start to piece together the significance of the glitter bombs until I was about 5 years old. My big brother glowed more than any other person I knew. This kid was in a perpetual state of sparkle, and one day I decided I just had to know why. I channeled my inner Harriet the spy and observed his every move for 2 whole days before I made the connection. He lied constantly to everyone about the most mundane things, e.g., saying he had Frosted Flakes for breakfast when I knew he had Cinnamon Toast Crunch. You might expect my 5-year-old self to feel excited about this newly discovered superpower, and I did, for about 2 minutes. Then all I felt was sadness when I remembered how my mother shimmered with light each time she told me she loved me. Fast forward 13 years, and my strong preference to avoid socializing resulted in a perfect GPA and a full ride to college. By living off campus and attending a large university, I managed a modicum of anonymity that allowed for limited human interaction. After 8 more years, I obtained an advanced degree in psychological and brain sciences, and I secured gainful employment in my alma mater's research department. I now have access to the fMRI, which I can use for personal research interests, e.g., my abnormal brain, if I am discreet. That's how I know as much about my condition as I do. One caveat about my flair for lie detecting I have yet to mention is the need to be physically near the liar in question for it to work. My current hypothesis is that I have an acute sensitivity to some pheromone secreted during the act of deception. When communicating via email, text, phone call, or even Skype, I am as vulnerable as the next person, which I consider a blessing. You have no idea how many lies an average person tells in a day. And all of those little white lies make up the fabric of our social relationships. I would probably be a celibate shut-in without the miracle of online dating. It has given me the opportunity to get to know someone well enough to share the details of my condition before meeting in person. Most guys can keep from lying for the length of one date, especially if they hope to get laid at the end of it. After exchanging some witty banter in a comment thread on Reddit, I hit it off with a guy, and when he was persistent with his advances, I began the long process of revealing what it means to be in a relationship with me. I promised not to ask questions I did not want the honest answer to, and Bradley promised to be brutally honest with me when it counted, or to stay silent in feeling-sparing situations. There could be no in-between. We were together for almost a year when he told me he loved me for the first time while we were folding laundry. My relief was palpable when the only spark in the room was metaphorical. We've been living together for a year now, and I thought I knew him better than anyone. I mean, hello, human lie detector here. Imagine my surprise when, a few nights ago, a police officer knocked on our door to ask if either of us recognized the girl in a photo. Her body had been found nearby, brutally raped and beaten to death. I examined the photo intently, my heart aching for the poor girl. She looked to be about 16 or 17, and I'd never seen her before. I told the officer as much, and Bradley just shook his head. "You didn't even look at the picture, son. Please take a look and tell me if you recognize her," the officer demanded, shoving the picture in Bradley's face. That's when Bradley said, "No, sir, I've never seen her before in my life," and I was nearly blinded by the glitter bomb that exploded in my field of vision.
When I was a child, there was nothing to eat. I was the eldest of 5, and so it was my job to make sure that I always let my brothers and sisters eat before me. War was inching inward from the coast, and as it marched closer, our food grew scarcer. Animals fled the area, or were slaughtered and consumed in panic by the other families in our village. My father was a wise and cautious man, and so we waited to slaughter our 2 chickens until the fall, when grass and tree bark had become too hard to find or inedible. The other families knew we had chickens, and father stayed up all night, every night, to watch over them. He had to kill at least one boy from a neighboring town who had gone mad with hunger and tried to burn down our small home with a burning branch. When the chickens were not but bones, and the bones had grown brittle and porous from mother's many soups, my parents sent my 2 eldest siblings and I to collect bugs and field mice for supper. We were hungry, but not quite starving until one morning we woke to the first frost and there was nothing alive left to eat. My parents began to discuss the inevitable. Perhaps my father should go to the coast and sell his father's pocket watch to one of the drunken but well-paid soldiers. It was the only thing we had of value and the only family heirloom my father had to pass down to me. I didn't want him to go. I was afraid war would arrive while he was gone, and I was too young and too weak to protect my mother and younger siblings. I begged him to stay, but he insisted it would be all right and promised to be back within 2 weeks. I was so afraid, and when he and Mother were outside preparing his satchel, I smashed the pocket watch under my foot and placed it back in my father's half-rotted desk. My mother cried for days. Father did his best to comfort her as I watched them peel the leather from my father's boots and boil the hide for dinner. The next night, Mother found a dead rat and boiled away the disease with the new fallen snow from outside. In the evening after that, she filled our bellies with rat bones and more melted snow. My little brother, Albert, kept everyone awake that night, crying over his hunger. He begged for all the things we'd eaten when we had a garden and animals: beef stew, white rolls, succulent corn, and spiced lamb. He made all of our stomachs moan and torture us, and I soon screamed at him to be quiet when Mother sobbed from her room. Father stroked Albert's hair for hours, and then went back into his and Mother's bedroom, shutting the door behind him. Albert moaned until the thin light of dawn peeked through our threadbare curtains. I could hear Father in his room, tinkering with the watch. My hunger had long worn out my fear of soldiers, and I silently prayed that he could repair it. Father worked on the pocket watch all through the day and into the night. Celia had found dead crickets in the walls of the abandoned bakery, and as we ate them, Father emerged from his bedroom with Mother right behind him. The smile on his face was one I had almost forgotten, as I had not seen it since the day my youngest sister was born. He told us that he had repaired Grandfather's watch and that he'd heard a soldier encampment nearby. 3 days, he promised us. 3 days and I will return with carrots and lamb and rolls so big they'll fill your bellies for a year. We clapped our hands in delight and ran around our small dirt yard with the delight and glee that seemed a foreign language to us. Father said that we were all to help Mother find beautiful things with which to dress the table. The next morning he gave us all a piece of rubber from the sole of Mother's shoes to chew on and sent us out on a mission after kissing us goodbye and promising to be back before we'd remember he had left. We had such fun that day, gathering horseshoes and shards of broken glass. We threaded bits of twine through the horseshoes to hang above the table and tied the glass to the ends, hoping they would shimmer in the lamplight. We returned home as the sun set, happy with our day's work and eager to return to it tomorrow. We weren't yet inside of home when I first smelled it. Onions, chicken broth, spiced lamb, even sweets. I ran as fast as I could, dropping our table dressings carelessly along the way in my maddening pursuit for food. I burst through the door to find Mother at the stove, preparing our meal in a quiet reverence. I threw my arms around her and asked if Father was home already. "Yes, my love. He had chanced to meet a wealthy mercenary on the road who was only too happy to buy your grandfather's watch." I hugged her even tighter and sat down at the table as my brothers and sisters came spilling through the doorway. They found their places quickly, hungry, expectant looks upon their faces. Father came out of the bedroom and took his seat at the end of the table as Mother brought over a steaming platter of spiced, boiled lamb. She nodded at us, and we filled our hands with the rich meat, hardly bothering with our plates. After dinner, we were sent to bed with full tummies, barely a word having been said by anyone since our dinner had been set to table. We ate our fill the next night, and then the next, and the next. but as our food stock started to dwindle, so did Mother's health. Each day bled more out of her until we were left fighting over scraps of raw meat while our mother lay weak and wilting nearby. The first night I went again without food was the night that the hazy, happy ether began to lift and my memories of the past few days became confusing. I recalled that the spiced lamb I consumed with such ferocity had actually been sickly sweet, and the accompaniments I had first smelled from afar had never been brought to the table. I couldn't remember Mother eating anything in all the days since Father had returned. Instead, she'd sat quietly next to us at the table, staring at the pile of gray meat we consumed with such fervor. And Father, I couldn't recall hearing his voice since the morning he had left for the soldier encampment. His chair had sat empty night after night, and as the peripherals of my memory formed shape, I couldn't be entirely sure he had ever been there at all. At least, not since the morning he had cut pieces of rubber from Mother's shoes at the table. Frightened and starved, I didn't find sleep until the darkest hours of the night. The following morning, when Mother emerged from her room, I asked where Father had gone. She told me he'd left to become a soldier and sent us out to peel bark off the bushes in the forest. Father never returned. Perhaps the reason I didn't realize what happened back then was because it was too awful to consider, and I was so very hungry. But Mother died a few days ago, and in death she thrust the truth upon me. From her stock of meager possessions, I was bequeathed a small box that contained nothing more than a shiny, broken pocket watch. Perhaps she wanted me to remember it all, the only hope of our survival that I'd smashed under my heel. My father's last loving hug before he sent us to collect dressings for the feast, the overly seasoned gray meat, and the rancid smell that had began wafting out from under my mother's door, becoming more pungent each day. My father sacrificed more for his family than most ever would. I used to lament that I had nothing to remember him by, no family heirloom to pass down to my own children. But now I have his pocket watch, a thing I cannot give to my children. Not because the glass is shattered, not because the gears are cracked. I cannot part with the watch because it is a curse that I must bear, for the shiny, contorted metal has never lost the sickening smell of that sweet, silvery meat.
Every night at 3:21 a.m., a man hangs himself at the foot of my bed. I don't know who he is or what he is doing in my house, and it's scaring the hell out of me. I can't sleep, and I don't know how to deal with this problem. No matter what I try, the man is always there, every single night. I wake up and see him standing on my bedpost with a noose around his neck. As soon as I scream, he jumps backwards and hangs there. Then, at 3:22 a.m., his body disappears. I need you to help me. Just please, sleep in my room for one night. I'm positive he won't appear if I have someone with me. I knew my friend and neighbor Lewis could not possibly be telling the truth. This was only a fabrication of his own mind. I sent him out of my house with a couple of recommendations for good therapists in our area. 1 week later, I was shocked to learn that Lewis had committed suicide by means of hanging himself at the foot of his bed. I attended his funeral and paid my respects to his family before leaving with regret. Maybe I should have helped him out with his silly task, even if it was ridiculous. It might have stopped him from killing himself. It took a long while for me to fall asleep that night, and when I did, I was awakened shortly afterward by a noise in my bedroom. I opened my eyes blearily, and the first thing I saw was my digital clock, which read 3:21 a.m. I turned my head around, and Lewis was standing over me on the bedpost with a noose around his neck. I let out a scream of terror before he lets himself fall backwards, and he hangs there for a full minute, for the first of many times to come.
To be desired. The city life for a girl like me is one of infinite possibilities. I can be anything I wish with just a flash of my gaze, a twitch of my hips, and a whisper of forbidden desires. Too bad those which I intend these actions seal their fate upon my seduction. I have a hunger which cannot be fed, a lust that finds no satisfaction. You have heard these kind of tales before, and no doubt you have already identified the creature which I am. But there is another side to my nature, which you may not expect. I fear the night, the darkness. I don't want to be alone in the night, and I can't walk in the day. The treacherous existence that I asked for, all I ever wanted was to be desired. No one looked at me in the light, so I went to the shadows for help. It was the contract that I did not take the time to consider its requirements. But when the sun descends, only the lights of the city and the touch of a stranger can comfort me. But my desire to be loved was replaced by a hunger for mortal subsistence. So many men of promise, of wealth and charm, that among all the women I was blessed with such a variety of choices. Yet, when I would love them, my alternate lust would take over. Their eyes of longing would widen with fear. They would scream as long as their lungs remained intact. Their strong bodies would shrivel as my veins latched into them. When I was finished with them, my eyes would well with tears of blood, my body undulating with its own satisfaction. Then the whispers in the darkness, counting down each soul left to my contract. I hear their screams in my dreams, the demonic laughter at the reward that awaited each of them. Those who sought the satisfaction of the flesh over true romance, had they wanted the woman I was, they would have avoided this terrible fate. Had I been satisfied with the woman I was, I wouldn't have forced them to meet it. I tried staying in the shadows. The hunger was too much. I tried going to men with good hearts, those who no woman would look to. They wouldn't last with me. My body was just too much to resist. I was trapped in a cycle of doom. All I wanted was love, to be desired. Not this. I should have tried to just be the woman who I was. Instead, I'm a vile, wretched priestess of perdition. I hear whispers. One more soul. I know what this means. My contract will be ending, and I will join those which I helped condemn. I'm trying to stay in the darkness, but the lights of the city are calling me. I want to remain alone, but the lust is too great. I only wish to love you, but you will be devoured by my body, absorbed into the darkness, an eternity of agony. But don't be afraid. We will go together. We are victims of a life of unfulfilled desires. Let me kiss you, my darling. Comfort me with your love. I'm so afraid of the dark.
We've all had that panicky feeling before. While already having driven up the street a quarter mile, that oh shit factor, and it's all too real. Once your mind wanders to the thought of having accidentally leaving a hot appliance on in the house. You sometimes get a mental image of your house in flames, and as a result of your carelessness. I turned my car around for that very reason. I couldn't imagine what would happen if I lost all my precious belongings because I was absent-minded like that. It should have been a no-brainer, just to check that the stovetop dial was turned into the off position before taking off for the day. Shit! I repeated out loud, kicking myself verbally, already being 10 minutes towards work before having this realization. I think I left the stove on before I left the house. Did I remember to turn it off? I don't remember shit. When I got to my driveway and stepped out of my car, I couldn't take big enough strides towards my front door to calm my nerves. I needed to know if that damn stove was off. I turned the key and popped the lock before barging into my kitchen like a damned madman. My eyes turned to the oven in urgency. There it was, as on can be. Well, this is all I could muster up to say under my breath. That could have been a disaster, had I spent all evening at work without knowing I had left the damn stove going full blast. I could have lost my home, my belongings, and my poor cat. I could feel Dudley, my cat, brush by my leg. I leaned down to pat him as I breathed a sigh of content. This little guy was my best friend. The thought of a fire that I could have accidentally set, killing this innocent feline, sent chills down my spine. Only a lunatic could hurt such a precious creature like this on purpose. Everything that I held dear could have been gone for such a silly reason. My eyes turned to the countertop next. Jesus, I left my lunch on the counter too, still hot out of the frying pan. I spent all that time frying up my neighbor's fingers and eyes that I didn't have time to pack them into my lunchbox. I'm so forgetful sometimes. I chuckled to myself for this reason. Oh well, I thought to myself, I better go double check that I made sure to clean up the blood too. I checked the garage where I chopped up John's lifeless body and the hallway where I had dragged him after slicing his throat. Everything was tidy and tip-top shape. Good, I thought. Spotless. I said goodbye to Dudley and then walked back out my driveway, but stopped when I looked at my vehicle. God. I chuckled again. I left my damn car running.
I think I should share this with you, both to beg for your help and to tell everyone what not to do. My name is Michael and I live in London. I'm 20 and I'm a typical college student, like any other young man should be. I was a quick learner and my grades were pretty decent. I could even say they were good. Obviously, I spent some nights drinking Red Bull and trying to finish absolute impossible homework. Yes, I was learning to become a journalist, so I had to write a lot. Anyways, that's an aside. Let's get down to the real stuff. I got home from school one day. It was a Thursday to be exact. I was pretty tired, so I was going to take a quick nap before starting my homework. Guess what? I slept for almost 3 fucking hours. It was almost 9 when I woke up. I rushed to get some junk food from the nearest McDonald's, and then sat down to do my homework. I won't bother you with what I did, but it was hard. I looked at the clock once I finished. It was 11:52 p.m. God, I was tired. I stripped down to my pants and shirt and collapsed on the bed. I only had 7 hours to sleep, because my class started at 8, and I lived far away from school. Anyways, right before I went to sleep, I checked my phone for new messages, and as I did, I saw something weird. It was an app I had never downloaded. In fact, I'd only downloaded 2 apps on my phone ever. One was Instagram, and the other was Clash of Clans. The app was titled X Make It Happen, and the picture was a black screen with a tiny red dot in the middle. I didn't know what to think of it. I hadn't clicked on any ads or links that would cause a file to download. I tried deleting it, but for some reason it didn't delete. I was so tired that I decided to leave it where it was, thinking that downloading it wouldn't harm me, right? The next day, just as I finished my homework, I took out my phone and tried deleting the app. Of course, nothing. I even searched online for this app, but nothing came up. Then I decided to do something I will regret forever. I opened that fucking app. It was a black screen, then static, like an old videotape. Seconds later, a room appeared on my screen. It had brown walls and an old chair in the middle of it, covered with some kind of red liquid. I stood there, staring at it. Then something horrible happened. A large man appeared in the screen holding a knife. He stared at the camera for a minute. After a few minutes, he said something that chilled me to the bone. He said my address. Once I heard it, I tried exiting the app, but nothing happened. He started stating my online usernames, and my real name too, my credit card number, and so on. I was panicking, and I threw my phone against the wall and fell down, sobbing. After a few minutes, the banging on my door started. It's been 3 days now. My food is running out. The man at the door has an ear-piercing voice. He's saying my name over and over. Michael! Michael! Let me in, Michael! Michael! I have no idea what to do. He will break down the door and come in and do God knows what to me. I have no other way out of my apartment. I'm on the highest floor, and the closest person to me lives 4 stories down. I need help. My only defense is a kitchen knife. I don't know what's behind that door.
The winter of 1944. In the winter of 1944, with overtaxed supply lines in the Ardennes, a medic in the German army had completely run out of plasma, bandages, and antiseptic during a particular bad round of mortar fire. His encampment turned into a bloodbath, and those who survived claimed to have heard above the screams and barked commands of their lieutenant that someone was cackling with an almost girlish glee. The medic had made his rounds during the fire, in almost complete darkness as he had so many times before, but never had he been this short on supplies. But that didn't matter. He would still do his duty. He had always prided himself on resourcefulness. And when the bombardment moved to the other ends of the line, most men dropped off to sleep in the dark, still hours of the morning. New Year's Day, 1945. The men awoke at first light with screams. They discovered that their bandages were not typical bandages at all, but hunks and strips of human flesh. Several men had been given fresh blood transfusions even though there had been no blood supplies available. Each treated man was almost completely covered with a maroon stain of blood. After a while, the medic was found, sitting on an ammunition tin staring off into space. When one man approached him and tapped him on the shoulder, his tunic fell off to reveal that large patches of his skin, muscle, and sinew had been stripped from the torso, and his body was almost completely drained of blood. In one hand he held a scalpel, and in the other, a blood transfusion vial. None of the men treated for wounds that night in that camp saw the end of January 1945.
So I found this cave while walking through the woods a few miles from my house, and thought it would be a good time for a little exploration. I didn't have any kind of gear or whatever for something like this, but I figured the light from my phone would be all I needed, especially since I wasn't planning on going too far in. As I entered, I realized how dark it really was in there. Even with the light from my phone, my vision was limited. It was very narrow as I got further in, and had to turn or curve every couple of feet, making it impossible to get a look at what was ahead of me. The dark was the least of my problems, though. The intense silence felt like a weight on my chest. All I could hear was my heart pounding in my chest, and my footsteps making the same pit-pat noise against the damp rock, over and over and over. It was getting overwhelming. I thought of turning back before I invested any more of my day into something that was turning out not to be as fun as I thought it would be. I froze in place for a moment, thinking about my next move. Even if I stayed, what was I hoping to see realistically? And how far was I planning on going? That's when I heard a rock roll across the hard ground in the distance. I stopped breathing and tried to listen for whatever, or whoever, had caused the noise. My heart pounded even harder, blocking out the sound of my own thoughts. Another noise broke the silence, a very faint patter against the ground, getting closer. I ran without even processing what was happening. All I knew is I was terrified. I stopped when I couldn't hear the patter anymore, trying to catch my breath and figure out where the hell I was. The passage had forked off several times as I ran, and I didn't know how I was going to get back. As I was going to start trying to backtrack, my phone screen dimmed. Battery low. Fuck. And that's when I heard the scariest thing I've ever heard in my life. A loud, screeching noise filled the air, starting out ear-splittingly high-pitched and slowly getting deeper, transforming into a demonic growl. I wanted to run, but with the echo, I couldn't tell what direction that thing was in. And that brings me to where I am now. I'm writing this on my phone, with what little battery I have left. I had to turn the screen down to the point that seeing more than 4 inches in front of me seems impossible. I keep hearing that thing in the dark. It's running around the chamber that I'm in. Its steps keep echoing around, and now it's making almost like a sharp, quick, raspy grunting noise. Every now and then I swear I feel something right next to me, almost like it's over my shoulder. I'll feel something brush against my hair, but nothing's there. Maybe I'm just going crazy down here. I keep getting scary images in my head, probably from a fear-filled imagination of ghastly creatures. I'm going to put my phone on standby for a few moments to try to preserve my precious battery life, and maybe my sanity. I hid in a small cubby-like hole in the wall of one of the passages. Something had touched my shoulder, and then stroked my hand. When I'm not writing, I'm sitting in the dark, hoping my phone doesn't die. I'm going to start trying to find a way out of here. I can hear a stream, so that might lead to a way out. This was discovered in a Word file on a phone, found in a remote cave in Oregon. A person was also found nearby, mumbling to himself. His eyes were missing, believed to be self-inflicted, and his teeth were filed to points. There were chunks of his lip and a piece of his cheek missing, also believed to be self-inflicted. All police could get out of him is,
"He's in my head,"
which he repeats over and over. It's believed he suffered a psychotic break, due to getting lost in an enclosed environment, which was limiting several senses. There's a short video he took on his phone at one point, showing the eyes of what looks to be some sort of cave-dwelling animal in the dark, walking back and forth, as if stalking him.
Back in high school, I'm 26 now, I won a contest that was being held around Halloween. The town I grew up in was extremely small, so honestly, there wasn't much competition. The contest went like this. Write a letter to a local ghost hunter explaining why you should be picked up to go on a real ghost hunt with them. They'll pick their favorite, and that will be the winner. No one I was close with was really into that kind of thing. I, however, was the biggest paranormal nerd in school, hell, maybe even the whole county. My letter consisted of how I had been on numerous amateur ghost hunts and my various experiences that came with them. I rattled off the equipment I used, EMF detectors, voice recorders, even dowsing rods. In a nutshell, I knew my shit, so I wasn't surprised when I was picked. I met up with the investigators Halloween night at around 9 p.m. It was a man and a woman in their mid to late 40s. Their names were Bobby, but he preferred Bo, and Kathy. They gave a quick rundown of the equipment, and I just stared in awe. Night vision cameras, EMF detectors, motion sensors, the works. I was going to be in heaven. Then they told me about the location. There was an abandoned asylum about an hour's drive away. They explained that I would ride in the back of their van with all the equipment and just leave my car parked there. I was iffy at first, but I wasn't going to turn back now. This was my one chance to go on a legitimate ghost hunt, so I sucked it up and climbed in. We pulled up to the front gate a little after 10 p.m. with me eagerly peeking my head from the back to see what awaited me. The gate was huge, standing at an easy 15 feet tall. Vines snaked up the brick pillars and a heavy padlock held the gate closed. Bo turned to me and said, "You want to do the honors?" And handed me a key. I'm sure my eyes were basically glowing with excitement at this point. I yanked the key from him without saying a word and ran to open the gate. Once it was open, we parked at the front entrance and started loading in the equipment. After it was all unloaded, Kathy began to explain a little more about the place and what our plan of action was. It was built in the early 1900s, but was shut down a few decades later due to mistreatment of patients. It's an old story that's been told 1,000 times, sadly. We set up the cameras on tripods and placed them in various hotspots around the first floor. I was very disappointed to figure out we were only investigating the first floor. We didn't have enough equipment or time to cover the whole place. That would be a week's worth of work, Kathy told me. I believed it too. This place was enormous. After the cameras were up and rolling, we began the real investigation. Walking up and down the empty hallways of an abandoned asylum is not something I was expecting to do on my Saturday night. But there I was, with a digital thermometer in my hand checking for cold spots. Kathy stayed behind with the EMF detector, and Bo was ahead of both of us, sitting against the wall with a digital voice recorder. He asked all the questions you would expect, but it was when he asked, "Is there anything we can do to help you?" that shit really hit the fan. Keep in mind that at this point in the investigation, the only evidence we had gotten were a few bangs, some weird cold spots, and what we thought was a whisper on the voice recorder, but even that was hard to hear. Basically, we had given up, and were completely caught off guard as to what happened next. As soon as the word left Bo's mouth, Kathy called out, "Hey, I'm getting a huge spike, a steady 6.3. Hoping that it wasn't just some fluke of technology, I checked the thermometer in my hand. Guys?" I called out. They both looked at me. Bo asked, "What, you gonna drop in temp?" "No, it's rising, and fast." Before I knew it, I was sweating bullets, partly out of fear and partly because it felt like I had just been shoved into a furnace. I was burning up. "The thermometer is reading 105, I exclaimed. Their expressions soon matched mine, fearful and worried. This was unlike anything I or them had ever heard of. "I'm gonna play back the recording," Bo said. Kathy and I headed over to where he was to listen to it. The thermometer still read the same and the EMF was nearly off the charts.
When Bo played back the EVP session we just got done recording, I thought we were all going to faint. He scrubbed through slowly, trying to find the point where everything began happening. Eventually he did. We all leaned in to hear myself say the temperature is rising, and then a garbled, mangled voice chokes out the words, "Help us." It wasn't in a mocking tone, it sounded like it was in absolute despair. We all sat there dumbfounded as to what to do next. I checked the thermometer once again, only to find now that it was back to normal. The EMF was at a baseline as well. The rest of the night, sadly, was uneventful aside from some phantom footsteps and a photo that possibly had an apparition. This might seem a little anticlimactic, and believe me, I thought it was as well, until the team got back to me a week later with some new information. After a ton of digging, they found the real reason the place was shut down. In 1926, 5 patients were tied together in the middle of that hallway and lit on fire. Apparently the owner was heavily into the occult and wasn't above human sacrifice. When I found that out, the EVP and the strange rise in temperature all made sense. The picture I spoke of is long gone now, so don't bother asking for it. I'm not in touch with Kathy or Bo anymore, as I've decided I'm much happier watching from afar rather than participating. I haven't been on a ghost hunt since, actually. The building was demolished about a year or so after this all took place. It's just an empty lot now. An empty lot with a lot of dark history.
I have always hated family gatherings. I hate my birthday most of all. Year in, year out. It's always the same. Everybody goes through the motions. Everyone plays their part. My mom bustles about the kitchen, preparing finger food and greeting guests with fake smiles plastered across her face. My dad always drinks way too much and staggers around, laughing too loud and slapping people in the back way too hard. My grandmother smothers me with kisses and I shudder with disgust as I feel her hairy chin brush against my cheek. My uncle bombards me with questions asking if I have a boyfriend yet. If not, why not? My aunt tells me all about her daughter and how well and perfect she is and how she's doing at school. She always takes pains to mention how smart she is and how much smarter she is than me. My little cousins, they race around the house like cockroaches, stomping on the floor, jumping on the stairs, squealing and hollering at the top of their lungs. They climb over furniture and crawl under tables, pulling and tugging at everyone in sight. Nothing goes untouched by their grubby little hands. Around and around they go, like rats on a wheel. Honestly, I can't believe I'm related to these people. But I have to hold my tongue. I don't want them to resent me more than already. I'm pretty sure they don't like me as much as I don't like them. The table is lined with soggy sandwiches and steak chips. Bottles of wine are followed by bottles of whiskey and vodka. They all sit around the living room, gulping down their drinks, swapping stories about the good old times and boasting about themselves. I cringe as I listen to them, laughing and cackling like a bunch of hyenas. It's enough to drive anyone insane. I get up and leave the room, desperate to clear my head. I know that in his jacket pocket, my uncle has a packet of cigarettes and a lighter. Surely he won't miss one. I think. I can hear all the adults in the living room singing songs. So I go to the kitchen to sneak a quick smoke. Surely nobody would notice. There's a strange smell in the air that makes me wrinkle up my nose, but I don't pay much attention to it. My little cousins are already in the kitchen, up to mischief, and as usual, they're annoying. They give me a startled look when I come in, as if they've done something naughty and they're afraid I will catch them. I put the cigarette between my lips and head over towards the window. I flick the cigarette lighter and suddenly a jet of flame shoots across the room to the old gas stove. There's a deafening explosion and the room erupts in flames. The whole house is on fire. I hear the screams and cries. I smell the burning flesh. I feel the intense heat as we are consumed in the inferno. And I close my eyes and sigh with relief as all dissolves into silence. Until next year, I will be 14 again, over and over again.
I am always with you. I was there from the time you were born. I stood in the delivery room, staring down at you before you could even open your eyes to see me. Your parents, relatives and doctors couldn't see me there, in the corner, watching you with cloudy eyes. But I was there from the time that you were born, and I followed you home. I was with you always, your constant companion. You played with your toys alone while I stared from all angles in nearby mirrors, my matted, clotted hair with oily sweat that hung off my dented forehead like glue. I was always your constant companion, drifting behind your mother's car on your ride to preschool. You alone in the bathroom, but I was on the other side of the door, wind whistling through the bruised hole in my throat. My arms twisted and hanging in their sockets as I stood, hunched on the other side of the shower curtain. I wait and follow you. I follow and drift behind you. I'm not seen. I'm almost not there in light. You never saw me that morning, as I sat across from you at the breakfast table, a shiny red clot hanging from an empty tooth socket, as I gaped grotesquely at you. I wonder sometimes if you know I'm there. I think you are aware, but you'll never understand just how close I am. I spend hours of your day doing nothing more than breathing in your ear. Breathing. Gagging, really. I crave to be close to you, to always wrap my crippled arms around your neck. I lie near you every single night, cloudy eyes staring at your ceiling, underneath your bed, at your sleeping face in the dark. Yes, you caught me staring occasionally. Your parents came running down to your room one night when you screamed. You were just beginning to talk, so you were only able to cry out. You thought you'd never forget the sight of me with my collapsed jaw hanging to my chest, swinging back and forth. I sank back into your closet, and your mother was unable to see me, though you pointed and pointed and pointed. You thought you'd never forget when they left that same night. You saw the closet door cracked so softly, and me crawling across the floor to your bed on all fours, shambling in jerking movements as I pushed myself under your bed on disjointed limbs. You learned a new word for me, boogeyman. Not quite the monster you thought I was. I'm just waiting and following you always, touching your face with my knotted fingers as you sleep. You'll see me again soon. Any day now. I'm coming, blunt and brutal. One day you'll walk across the road, and I believe I'll plough into you with a loud roar and a screech. You rolling on the pavement, rolling under wheels, blunt force metal fenders, and my fingers touching your face again and again. As you stare up from the cold pavement with cloudy eyes, your matted, clotted hair hanging in your face, and your jaw unhinged and swinging to your chest, you'll see me approaching. No one else will see me. You'll stare past them into my eyes, and I'll leer down at you. For the first time in our life, something like a smile will come down over my face. You'll swear you're looking into a mirror as clotted red bubbles from our mouths. I'll lean down, past the doctors and the ogling people, and pick you up in my crooked arms. Our faces will touch, my wings will unfurl, and then you'll have to follow me. I am always with you. I am your guardian angel.
My Only Experience with ASMR by Aya. I've been dealing with anxiety my entire life. Whether in social situations, work situations, or even at home by myself, feelings of panic rise to the surface and consume me. Meds don't work. Therapy doesn't work. Each day, I wake up knowing, at some point before I go back to bed, I will feel like the world is about to collapse around me. I heard about ASMR online. For those who don't know, it's short for Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response. Basically, it's an induced euphoric response that supposedly causes deep relaxation and a sense of well-being. I've never been relaxed. I've never been well. Like all natural products designed to elicit a positive biological response, the ASMR space on the internet is full of bullshit. Countless fraudsters and faux experts tout extraordinary claims, and while scientists have found no direct correlation between ASMR and health, mental or otherwise, those who sell ASMR-related products will tell you it's the next big thing, the thing doctors don't want you to know about. Needless to say, I was skeptical. Skepticism, however, in the face of daily panic, can often upshift into something resembling hope. I did my research. I sifted through claims and medical information with my untrained, but nonetheless determined mind. Another problem with something like ASMR is that people claim they know what they're doing, when in fact, they're just trying to get hits on their website. YouTube, for example, is full of kids talking seductively into their microphones while dull synth pop plays in the background. Those are the top hits for ASMR. You need to dig deep before you find something you think is legit. And I did. Last year, I found an ASMR site run by a university in Ukraine. The cursory listen I gave seemed relaxing enough. A soft voice over gentle electronic pulses and the certain sounds from nature, like running water. The associated imagery was abstract and colourful, reminding me of Easter palettes and springtime flowers. The samples were only 5 minutes long. To access the rest, they needed credit card and shipping information. At least the subscription came with a free Blu-ray copy made 10 weeks later. I plugged in my payment information, name, and address, knowing American Express would cancel any fraudulent charges in the event the Ukrainians wanted to scam me. I wasn't particularly concerned about that though. The payment went through, and I was greeted by a members-only page and libraries filled with various ASMR videos. I put on my noise-cancelling headphones, clicked the first video, and set it to full screen. The world melted away. For the first time in my life, I felt relaxation overtake the omnipresent anxiety. Peace washed through my mind and passed in a wave down to my chest and through my limbs. My sensation of self vanished. Whatever this university had developed, it was a miracle. Enraptured by the sights and sounds and sensations, I remained in my chair for 2 straight days. I awoke to the feeling of my headphones being torn off and a rough hand shaking my shoulder. Panic bloomed in my chest, but agony quickly overtook it. My legs and lower back were searing with hideous pain, and I screamed, only to have the same hand clasp over my mouth. "Shut up," came a voice with a thick accent, a Ukrainian accent. "Scream again, and we'll take even more. Do you have any money in the house? Any jewelry?" I tried to shake my head, which was pinned back against the computer chair from the man's brute strength. No, I grumbled behind his hand, tears streaming down my face from the overwhelming pain. "Good. Now sleep for an hour or so." He strapped the headphones back on my ears and straightened me up so I was facing the monitor again. Before slipping back beneath the waves of bliss, I realised I'd been strapped in my chair, and I didn't know why. After an hour, the video ended. The audio cut out. The pain returned. I screamed again, this time alone in my apartment. I was still strapped to the chair. I looked down at my legs, certain they were broken or slashed by the intruders. But my legs were gone. My screaming stopped, and everything blurred. I reached for the phone on my desk. I managed to dial 911 before passing out, my hand groping at the pain in my back where my left kidney had been.
Remnants from the Journal of Zahir Hajar by James Marie Parker III. And the Americans were foolish enough to look for the lost city of Namathoptra, that once great kingdom of decadence and splendor, where even ancient magic had supposedly been practiced among the common people before Egypt even existed. Even those who believed in Atlantis and Mu don't believe in Namathoptra exists. Neither did I, but their money was good, so I looked, and I saw on the altar all manner of bugs and crawling things, each one sitting on a throne of silver. I could feel them watching us, judging our worth. Then we saw those worm-ridden priests make more symbols with their raised hands. We weren't sure what would happen next. Our false belief in the non-existence of magic having been shattered. We saw dirt swirl around these small cockroach idols, slowly at first, but soon whipping faster and faster around them, even though there was not even the slightest breeze that accounted for it. Nevertheless, even though I could barely see through the miniature sandstone that the priests had created, for a moment I thought I saw the antennae, one of those golden idols, twitch slightly. In my ignorance, I had just assumed it was a trick of the light. When I saw Jimmy laying himself along the ley lines, spiders still crawling out of his mouth. They were trailing their silk behind them as they exited, crawling in single file alongside the carved runes etched into the earthen floor, and I saw Jimmy smile at me. Not that boyish smile I remember from our travels together, but a far more sinister grin. In our mad dash up the broken steps, we could hear the thousands of beetles wearing Samantha's skin calling out to us, wailing about the destruction of Gan, about the hyena and the judgment of Jan Reed on those daring to think themselves above the gods. And even then, these idols will not leave us. But we dared not leave them there, and nobody had the courage left in them to go back to Namathoptra. We spent all night discussing what we would do. Already I can feel them crawling inside me. I can hear them asking for their father to let them out. They offer me magic even the worm-ridden priest could not hope for. the wealth of the kingdom still lying beneath the sands. All these things to me if I become their god. See my skin shift as they burrow just underneath it. I can only hold them back for so long, and already I can feel my will draining away, but I cannot let them escape. Even with all they tempt me with, I know what will happen if I do. I know I should throw myself into the fire. I need to. I hope I have the strength to do what is right, but I just do not look for Nemethoptera. Do not bring anything from that cursed kingdom back to the land. Recovered and translated fragments of Zaire Hajar's journal, currently being studied at the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities.
I shouldn't have stared at the eclipse by Spooky Boo. Darkness. That is all I see from day to day is darkness. Okay, most of the time I see darkness. Other times I see... Let me start by telling you what happened. It was 1979 and my class was really excited. The whole town was excited. We were going to be right in direct line to a solar eclipse. We were warned by the teachers, the press, the parents, basically every adult not to even look at the eclipse. Not even just a tiny bit, because it could cause blindness. We could go blind for just a few seconds, or go blind forever. No one really knows, because people typically don't just stare at it. And those that do don't tell you what really happens after. There is a darkness in the world that only happens when the bright light of the sun is blocked and the ultraviolet rays are present. People claim it's okay to look when the diamond ring or Bailey's beads are visible, but do not do it. They will come for you. They will take your sight and then they will haunt you forever. I know, because it happened to me. We were all so excited. We built our little reflection boxes so we could see the eclipse happening before our very eyes. You can't see them when you are not blind. You can't hear them either. Their very existence is blocked. So there we were, happy little kids watching a once-in-a-lifetime event through silly little boxes. I was not pleased. I was an adventurous and undisciplined little brat. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. As the moon started to cover the sun, it grew dark outside. Nothing was out of the ordinary except it started to get cold and dark. You could hear a pin drop, it was so quiet. People were probably watching through their stupid handmade boxes. I looked around and noticed that none of the teachers were paying attention to us. The adults were so obsessed with seeing the eclipse as they didn't care to notice if we were looking at all. As it passed overhead and it grew dark enough to peek, I lowered my box enough to take a glimpse. It was beautiful, dazzling. There wasn't complete darkness, but it was very dark. I stared in awe at the beautiful ring of the sun for about 30 seconds until I heard them. The growls and the whispers. The chatter was all around me, growing louder. Suddenly, I dropped my gaze and realized it's all I could see was the ring of the sun. I closed my eyes tight and rubbed them. The reflection of the ring wouldn't go away, and neither would they. When I opened my eyes, I couldn't see anything. I felt a scratch on my leg. I looked down and saw it. At first I thought it was a rat, but then I noticed it was a malnourished little human body. Its blanched skin was stretched tightly over its bones. Long, razor-sharp fingernails protruded from the tips of its fingers and toes. It looked up at me and smiled this hideous grin with razor-sharp teeth and a mouth that stretched from ear to ear. Its wretched fingernail trailed down my leg and blood started trickling down in droplets. The cut wasn't enough to cause major bleeding, but it was obvious. It licked the droplets with a long, snake-like tongue, then smiled for more. I jumped back, suddenly aware that I couldn't see anything. When I fell into Houston, the fat, ugly school bully, he pushed me and then I slammed into Julia and stepped on her toes through her sandals. When she screamed, I felt someone grab my forearm and start to shake me. "Jennifer, are you okay? Did you look at the sun?" It was my teacher's voice. She put her arm around me and helped me back to the office where I waited while the school nurse bandaged up my leg. It was quiet in there. There was no whispering or ugly little creatures waiting to carve my skin into a fresh meal. I closed my eyes and curled up on the nurse's table and fell asleep. A few minutes later, I heard my mother rush into the room, waking me up. For a moment I had forgotten all about the little creatures. I could see the outline of my mom, but nothing else. If I focused on one object, I could almost see it, but not the whole object. It was a huge blur. I heard her thanking the nurse and dialing the phone to call her doctor. I just sat there, a little shocked, but wondering if what I had seen earlier was real. My mom helped me to sit in a wheelchair the school owned for emergencies, and I could hear the nurse and teacher not far behind as she wheeled me outside to the car. There they were, outside playing in the grass, jumping in front of cars, with the cars never hitting them. I looked in all directions and those things were scattered everywhere. Scrawny little human demons laughing at us as we went through our boring daily lives. There was one with blood on its claws. It laughed with the others as if telling a crude joke, and then it noticed me. The slender tongue licked its lips and its eyes never left mine. I could see all the bones working on the scraggy body as it inched its way toward me, smiling and licking its lips. It jumped on me, tearing the flesh of my arms with its tiny little claws. I kicked and screamed wildly, "Get off of me!" I cried out with my arms flailing like crazy. My mom cradled me and put me into the car as I screamed, and just like that it was gone. I would think I was losing my mind, but I knew the scratches were there. My arm burned when those hideous claws slapped me. My mom held my hand as she drove me to the doctor and calmed me. We pulled into the parking structure and walked to the elevator. I noticed the demons all playing in the sunlight, but not inside the parking lot, realizing they can't play outside of the sun. "Mom, can't you see them?" I sobbed. "See what, honey?" She knelt down in front of me and wiped my tears away. "The little demons, Mom, they're everywhere. But not in here, not inside of buildings or the car, only in the direct sunlight outside." "No, honey, there are no little demons." "Oh, look at that. You must have scratched yourself in your tantrum." She used a tissue from her purse to wipe away the droplets of blood on my arm. "They're there, Mom, and they're waiting for me." The doctors all thought I was in shock after losing my eyesight and gave Mom some medication to put me on so I could sleep. I refused to ever go outside again. I could see them playing in my yard during the day, and at night they all disappear. My parents think I have an anxiety disorder, and I just pass it off as such. I won't leave my house ever again because I can see things no one else can, and if they realize that I can see them, then I am dead. This is Spooky Boo. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this story, head on over to my website at www.scarystorytime.com and make a comment on the post. You can also talk about it in my new horror forum.
Hey guys, I hope you all enjoyed my 500 subscriber collaboration. I want to thank all of these amazing narrators who took part in this collaboration with me. Thank you so much. You guys are so wonderful. I also want to give a big thank you to all of you, my subscribers, for supporting me and getting me to 500. Thank you so much. I am so grateful. Please go and subscribe to each of these lovely, amazing narrators if you haven't already. All information will be below with links to their channels. And don't forget,